I'm asking a question, I don't just want to know an answer. I want to know the right answer, and I want to know how we know that's the right answer. And if you can be curious that far into something at that level to say, I want to know what we know and I want to understand how we know it, you would be surprised at how far that gets you. And also how far that gets you just asking those questions into uncovering like, oh, like I thought this was a well-reasoned thing. And as you're telling me what we know and how we know it, I realize you are talking nonsense. You have no idea what you're talking about, because people who have positions that can be destroyed with reason or logic or evidence or facts, like I'm not interested in what doesn't survive that scrutiny. If you are going to scientifically scrutinize something and you're going to ask what is true and how do we know, if your arguments can't hold up to that, then you don't really have a very good argument for why things are that way.
You know, your story about going up to upstate and looking at the stars really kind of struck a chord with me, because I remember, as I said, I'm from New York too, and I know that just the amount of light pollution in the city, your experience of what space looks like is very different from people who grew up in rural areas. And I remember my first trip down to, I had family that lived in rural Georgia, away from the city, and the nights there, I was blown away. I had a very similar experience as the one that you described at about the same age. And it was, I didn't go into the field, obviously, but it definitely got me interested in space. And I'm a huge science fiction fan. And so that's when I started watching Star Trek and all of these things. And I was just curious, are you a science fiction fan? And if so, what would be your favorite things?
Well, I did write a book on Star Trek, so if I'd
need
be
that
remiss if I didn't say that I'm a big fan of Star Trek. So the book I wrote is called Treknology. When I was in high school,
I know this book. I haven't read it, but I didn't know that you wrote that. I'm definitely getting it now.
It looks like this.
Yep. All right. Wow. You learn something new every day.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, The Next Generation was airing. You know, I think it came to an end in maybe my junior year of high school. And then my senior year, this book came out, and it was called The Physics of Star Trek, and it was written by Lawrence Krauss. And I read this book. And I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. He focuses on some of the physics aspects, and he works quantum physics and cosmology into it. And in that subsequent time, from the mid-90s until now, I went to college, I went to grad school, I became a cosmologist in the same subfield as Krauss. And so when I realized we're getting on to the 50th anniversary of the original series, and we're getting on the 30th anniversary of the debut of The Next Generation, wouldn't it be fun to look not just at the physics-based technologies, but all of the technologies from Star Trek, or as many as I could fit, and say, okay, it's been 50 years since the original, 30 years since Next Gen. What are we looking at? How close are we to having these technologies actually be a reality? How many of them are still impossible? How many of them that we once thought are impossible are now possible? How many of them are we already well on our way to? How many of them have we surpassed Star Trek's dream for what they would be? So we took a look at 28 different technologies, from replicators to, your pads, your personal assistant digital display, or whatever it is, which, as you pointed out, a smartphone goes well beyond the dreams of any Star Trek device. Right. I think Lieutenant Uhura in the original series had an electronic clipboard, which was like, oh, you could write on this and it'll actually save what you write electronically, like one of those flip and sketch things that if it had a save button.
She had the Bluetooth earpiece as well.
She did. She had the wireless headset. They had the big walkie-talkie universal translators.
So that's Star Trek. I'm glad you're a fan, and I'm definitely checking out that book. The other medium, most people know that I'm a huge fan. I'm wearing a Superman shirt, so it wouldn't be now that I have a scientist on board, I figured I would ask you a question about that. And basically, if you had to guess, how does Superman fly?
Well, we all know, if you're a fan of Superman, that Superman gets his powers from the yellow sun.
That's right.
Right? Over on Krypton, where he's got a red sun, he has no powers.
Yeah.
Right? He's just a normal baby super guy. Like, he's just Jor-El's kid, right? He's Kal-El, the kid of Jor-El. Nothing super famous, but you get him a yellow sun. And what happens? Well, all of a sudden, he's super powered. So if I had to say, what is it about a yellow sun that's different than a red sun that allows Superman to be so powerful, I would have to say, well, look, a yellow sun, everything, if you heat it up, it's going to emit what we call a black body spectrum of radiation. This is why lava is red, right? It's because it's just rock. It's just rock, but you heat it up hot enough and it's going to start radiating heat, right? Hot things don't look hot. You touch something on the stove and you go, oh crap, I burned myself. Why? Well, because it's just a piece of iron and it's not hot enough to glow. So you touch it, you burn yourself because it's emitting infrared radiation. Well, you turn up the heat even more, it'll start emitting visible radiation. You turn the heat up even more, and you'll start getting ultraviolet and X-ray radiation. So our sun, we get quite a bit of ultraviolet radiation. A red sun, not so much. So I would say that's probably what it is. Whatever it is that's giving Superman his powers, it's got to be coming from the sun. So I'm going to say that Superman must have some internal either battery or capacitive cells that they can absorb this high energy radiation and emit it later on in a burst. And when he does, I guess he can make himself thrust like that, or he can figure out some way to manipulate Earth's magnetic field, although I've also seen him fly in space. So presumably he can emit his own thrust. So I would say whatever mechanism is, Superman is solar powered, and not by every sun, only by suns that are at least of a certain temperature.
That's the first scientific answer I've ever gotten to that question. So that was more than what I expected, but I appreciate it because, as I said, no one is a bigger fan than I. That I know.
Well, that's great. That's great. I love Superman. Superman, to me, he's always the hero that if you gave a good person power, how would they use it? And that is so antithetical in so many ways to our world, where the people who seek power are the people who absolutely should not have it.
Right.